Hello everybody, welcome back to Fanblade. Finally, I'm going to get to finishing this thing. In the last couple of weeks I've had a few delays and a few things go wrong, which I'll talk you through as we go, but everything's here, everything's like, it's all going to work now. I can finally complete this thing and get it off my bench, because to be honest, I'm a little bit sick of the sight of it. As a learning experience and a platform for trying out an experimental finish, this thing has been wonderful, and the finish, I think, doesn't look terrible, but I know what I did wrong, and I know how to make it better next time, so that's where the true value of this thing comes from. And, it doesn't look bad, but you can definitely see where there's a lot of rippling in the finish. I know how to fix that. Also, I discovered that UV cured resin, it's a lot harder to polish to a high gloss. My regular methods did not work. I had to put a lot of hours into polishing this to even to get it to this standard. But that's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. But the biggest hold-up I had was the bridge by far. If you want to find yourself a single bridge block from an original 1980s vintage Hohner base, then they are available, but they are ridiculously expensive. I thought about trying to make my own. I thought about trying to cast things. I even pulled out some of those frets in a small crucible and tried to smelt some down. That didn't work at all. I eventually just had to bite the bullet and go on AliExpress, and I've bought a whole new set. So we'll be comparing these shortly. The other issue I had was sorting out some sort of pickup system. Now, the pickups that I took out of it could have just gone straight back in, but I like those pickups where they are on the Les Paul. That's not going to change. So I needed to do something more experimental for an experimental base. Now, to that extent, I made a humbucker-sized split coil. Now, this thing has several advantages. It also has several issues. The pickup rings and everything, it's all the exact dimensions for a standard humbucker, so it should be able to just drop in there. But because this design is designed for a 6-string guitar, and then they've sort of co-opted it for bass, what we have is a situation where the centre of each string is coming down so close to the edge of the housing that there's just not physically enough space to put the number of windings in there that I want. I could not figure out a way to do this any sort of differently to get more copper in there. And yes, it is, the perfect size to just drop in there, pick up surroundings and everything, but these coils that are in this thing only have 3,000 winds on them, and that's just not enough. I just don't see it working. And yes, having made this thing, I could pot it in epoxy and then drop it in the bass and see how it sounds as an experiment. But the truth is, I actually can't pot this one in epoxy because the housing is so flimsy, I've managed to crack it. This thing's broken. If I try and pot that, that's just going to leak everywhere. This is a non-starter. I then also had the idea that if we were to throw out that standard size and take full advantage of the width of these cavities, then I might be able to squeeze a little bit more on there. And the design I came up with sort of could work. Could sort of work, but there's still just not quite enough. And the coils, individual coils, they're just too small. I haven't tried winding one of these, but I estimate I'm only going to get about 4,000 winds on them, which, again, it's just not enough. These will be underpowered, they'll just sound anemic. So that, regrettably, is a waste of plastic, but, sometimes you just have to try these things to see if they're going to be viable. So having ordered some cheap parts from AliExpress, I simply decided to go with a set of these. They are Hot Rails clones, essentially. I have actually used these in a bass before. They're actually not bad. They've got a pretty reasonable sort of a bass tone in them. I think they are, well, I say designed. I think they are ripped off from the original designs to be guitar pickups, but they actually have a pretty decent bass tone, so, they're fine. They'll go in here, they'll be good. And, yes, 3D printed some pickup rings to go around there. They'll be fine. The other advantage is that I don't have to worry about pole piece alignment. And yes, I could persevere with this, but ultimately, I just want to get this thing finished, play it, and then work on something else. Now, finally, we come to what I want to call the headstock end of the neck, but it's obviously not got a headstock. Let's just call it the thin end of the neck. Lots and lots and lots of people pointed out that I took the 0 fret out. Well, of course I did. I needed to level the board. I can't do that with the 0 fret in the way. But, crucially, I didn't fill that slot. That is going to get its 0 fret, don't worry. Then, of course, that sits on there, and then you have the issue of double ball end strings, and I don't really want to get tied into having to have double ball end strings, because I also want to put flats on this, and then, it's not so much a case of the expense of them, although they do get pretty pricey, but just getting them in New Zealand. No one in New Zealand has double ball end flat wound Diodario strings. There's no suppliers carry them. There's such a small demand for them. So I need to make a little adapter to hold onto the strings at this end, just like I did on the original Hohner video that I made a few months ago. Except on that video, a user named CHF4486 said what you can actually do is use terminal blocks. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. While I'm using cheap aftermarket parts and bodging this whole thing together, I'm going to give this a go. I've actually cut a piece of that off, and it just lines up just nicely. It's not quite perfect, but it's good enough. There are, of course, some little brass inserts inside there. I'm going to have to cut those down a little bit because I don't want the tension of the string being supported on the brass, then pressing against the plastic against this piece, because that plastic is just going to get crushed. So I will have to trim this down a little bit. Also, it looks butt ugly. That's hideous. So I have 3D printed a little cover for it. That'll just slot in there, and then the whole thing should look pretty nice. So there it is. Yes, I'm just going to use some cheap parts from AliExpress just to get this thing playing again, just so that we can say that we saved a base from landfill. Yeah, there's no real deeper philosophical meaning for it than that. I think the final thing will be alright. Let's just get to it and put it together. Learning continues. Turns out you cannot drill a hole in this finish afterwards because it will break and peel off. Now, I don't know if that's to do with the fabric. I suspect it might have something to do with the fabric. Either way, important lesson to learn: drill your holes first before putting the finish on. That is a lesson that I repeatedly have to learn, and it still hasn't sunk in, but yeah. I'm hoping the knobs should cover most of it. Well, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. It's too late to do anything about it now, and I doubt anybody in the audience will notice anyway. So here are the original bridge saddles. They're a bit dusty. I'm not going to clean them off. Here are the replacements. So that's the original one there. Looks like it's some sort of cast aluminium, perhaps. I'm not sure what alloy it's made of. It's not magnetic. This one, also not magnetic, but there's actually way more substance to it. There's more metal in there. I wonder what they weigh. So here's the original, coming in at 19 grams, and the replacement 22 grams. Well, that makes sense. There's a bit more metal in the back of it. Yeah, I did have the option of just buying one of these, and that would have been fine. I'm sure that would have been okay. But it did occur to me that I didn't know what these were made of or what the differences would be, and sonically it might just be nice to have all 4 of them the same. So I'm going to install all 4 of those, which will mean I've got 3 of these left over. I know some of my viewers do collect parts for these bases, so if this is of any use to you, then please drop a line in the comments. Yeah, okay, so they are just a tiny little bit too wide. That's alright. It is simply a matter of just taking a little bit of the paint off, I think. Well, that was annoying. I actually had to sand all of the paint off to make those fit. Every single step of the way, this thing's just been fighting me. Right, let's see what can go wrong with my attempted string retainer. Right, the strings are on. The setup is approximate. I sort of need to refine it a little bit, but I can't do the fine intonation adjustments until I can actually hear what I'm doing, which means hooking up the electronics. Now, obviously this isn't great. I'd love to find a way to fix this damage here. The best way that I can think of is simply to use a larger knob, and I have found a couple of these jazz-based knobs with the flared bottoms, and that just sort of mostly covers it. It's a great way to cheat through that problem. So I'm going to do 1 volume knob per pickup, no tone knob. I don't really believe in them. You know this by now. Now, to improve the balance of these things, they really do need a neck dive compensator, which is just a rod or something sticking up to about the 12th fret to hang the strap on. That seems to work quite well. I've done it to several basses before. I've got a length of steel here. This was actually cut off the support rest for the electric upright bass. It's the end of a tom leg. So what I'm thinking with this is that I'll chuck it on the grinder and just remove that little sharp bit there, because it's a little bit dangerous. Then I'll chuck this in the lathe and just put a hole up the centre of it, mount a strap button on the end of that. Then what I've done in the past is I've always put a thread in the body and then a thread on the end so that this would be removable, so that you can fit this in its case. Well, I don't have a case for this. If I were to make one, then I could put this permanently in there and then build the case around that. Plus, that would save this getting lost. Yes, and with the knurling on there already, bit of epoxy, hold that right in there nice and tight. So I think that's what I'm going to do. Hook up the electronics, drill a hole in there and glue that in after I've mounted a strap button on the end of that, and then it's literally done. I'll set the intonation and we're good to go. know what more to say about it, really. Given up for dead, but bought back ready for another 40 years or something. Sounds pretty good too. I'm actually impressed with these pickups. I might use a few more of these on a few more things because they do actually sound pretty decent. And for the price, when nothing else will work, and when I don't have time or energy or the right design to build my own, they're not bad. They probably sound alright on a guitar as well. So it has been a proper experience with this thing. I've learned a lot. I will put that learning into practice on the next thing that I'm going to build. Like I say, I've just had a couple of weeks off, but I'm actually taking another couple of weeks off. The Christmas rush is, it's really quite a rush this year. But I've got something very, very special planned for the holiday build. Yeah, I know what I'm going to do, and it's going to be quite something. So I'll see you in a few weeks for that. But in the meantime, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for subscribing. And yeah, I'll be back real soon. Cheers.